he worked as a police officer, detective actually, until he retired.
Awesome. What was your family's expectations for you and your brother?
That we would go on to school, and that we would be, my father's push was always that we finish high school. That no matter what happened, we had to finish high school. He didn't even care if we liked it or not. He said that once, I remember that. But he wanted us to go on. And he did. He lived to see my brother go through service. Actually, my mother and father went to England to see my brother get married, which he married a girl from Lansing, Michigan, which is amazing. And go to England, marry you didn't marry an English girl. So he saw that he finished service. He'd become a police officer. He saw me graduate from college, to get my bachelor's, and so that expectation. Gosh, I've just said so much.
You kind of told me a little bit about growing up as a child. So you would go to your grandparents' house and how they taught you different things. Was there any other things that stand out to you as when you look back into your childhood that you want to share?
The importance of my grandmother and grandfather in Holgate. On the day that my grandfather, they only lived a few blocks from the school, and I would have been in 7th grade. My grandfather was outside the school when I came out. Now come on, 7th grade, you don't want your grandfather being there to pick you up. And it was to walk. So everybody was going to see. It was so significant because he said, "Where's your brother?" And I remember, I'm not responsible for my brother. Come on, a 7th grader, you don't want to be responsible for a 5th grader, and because there were 2 years difference with us. So we waited for my brother to come out from the area that he always came out, and we walked to Grandma and Grandpa's house. And next door to their house was a creek, and there was a bridge kind of thing that crossed over the creek, and there was a place that a lot of people would just sit and kind of watch the traffic go by, the time that it was. And my grandmother was sitting on this ledge, and she had candy bars. Nobody got candy bars before dinner. And this was right after school, so no. You could have apple, you could have vegetables from the garden, but never candy bar. And so she gave us candy bars, my brother and I candy bar, and said, "Let's just sit here and talk a little bit." It's like, she proceeded to tell us that we were going to be staying with them until our mom and dad could come back. Now, as a 7th grader, those are strange words to hear from your grandparents. And I jumped to, oh my gosh, something happened, because they both commuted to work. And then she proceeded to tell us that our aunt and uncle and their 5-year-old daughter, which would have been a cousin, were in a train accident. And so my brother looked, and I remember him looking at Grandpa saying, "Are they hurt?" And I remember my grandfather, because those are the things rather people want to, at the moment that you remember, but when you reflect back, you do. My grandfather looked down to the ground, and my grandmother said, yes, they were hurt so bad they died. So my aunt and my uncle were both killed. The cousin, who was 5, had been taken to a hospital, and then transported from that hospital to another hospital because she was in such severe condition. And my mom was the one designated by her brothers and sisters to stay with her. And it made total sense with family dynamics. But the reason it made total sense is my mother, remember when I told you my mother was a receptionist? My mother was a receptionist at a doctor's office. And on the day this accident happened, you say whatever you want about karma, my mother had been told to take some records over to the hospital. So she had walked from the medical facility to the hospital, and when she got there was an ambulance pulling up. And she decided to be the really great person because there was just so much chaos going on. And there was, she had one time told me that she remembers hearing these loud voices saying, get this one here and there was the male goes here, the female goes there, and the child will attend to because she's still breathing. And my mom she said she was thinking, oh, how horrific. Some family is going through this. She's holding the door open to be of some help, and she looks down to see her brother. So that's how she ended up, basically, with our cousin. Our cousin lived for 10 days and passed away. The whole family would agree, I know they would if we got together. The best thing that happened is she never regained consciousness. 5 years old, who's the first person you're going to ask for? But yeah, that was, and then the horrific thing was everybody turned to me because the two children that were left who had been in school when the accident happened, the boy was the same age as my brother and the girl was the same age as I am. So it became, I don't know why, designated that we were to help them get through this. So that's my first encounter with death. On a real...
Yeah. So then you stayed with
scale.
your grandparents for 10 days?
We stayed with our grandparents for 4 days. And then my father came home. My mother came home long enough to gather some clothes, and she turned around and spent some time with us. She also, during those days she was home, we went through the funeral of my aunt and uncle. And I will always remember, there are traumatic things that happened because I will always remember they put my aunt and uncle, their heads touching each other so that you could come up between. There are just certain things that you remember. And I remember the night that my cousin lost it. She had not cried. She had not expressed any sadness. She was just quiet. And then the one night, because they brought them to be with us, she just lost it. She just started, and then I didn't know what to do because all she did was sob. And, I'm a 7th grader. I don't know what do I do when you sob?
Yeah.
Tell you a funny story, and that I knew that wasn't appropriate. So,
Did they end up living with you?
No, they ended up living with my grandmother and grandfather.
Okay.
Until they reached 18.
So your school setup, you talked about your school a little bit there. So how many students were in your when I was growing up there was 35 students in my math class, 35. How many students were in?
Approximately 20.
How many teachers did you go how was your
different teacher for every subject. Once you got out of elementary.
Okay.
There was a teacher for every subject area.
Okay. Was it one school or was it separate, like you had elementary, middle school?
It was an elementary building, it was a middle school building, and it was a high school building, but they were all connected.
They were all connected, okay.
So it was one, if you will, one campus.
Okay. All right. So going more into your schooling, were you ever diagnosed with a disability, or were you considered the normal crowd?
I guess I was considered the normal crowd until in high school I was put in advanced classes.
Okay. So do you remember students with disabilities growing up? How were they treated in your school?
Like, I'm being recorded. I almost said the wrong word. They were at the time we didn't think it was wrong, but they were treated very poorly because they were in separate rooms. They weren't included. Now they would come in to eat lunch. They would be in gym class. They'd be in music class. They would be in art class. But for academics, they were kept in the special ed room.
And how did you portray them? Did you ever have interactions with them, or were they kept?
There was one young man, sorry that I'm laughing, there was one young man who was in our class who, looking back, and of course at the time, I was in high school, what did I know? But looking back, I'm sure that he was on the spectrum because everybody looked at him as different. And you would say things like, oh, ask him because he'll be able to figure it out. Because it wasn't a negative so much as it was, he just was different and walked to the beat of a different drummer. He went on our senior class trip. Now there's some significance here because it's called Attitude. Everybody was somewhat afraid that something would happen to him because he would be known just to take off. Well, we had one counselor with us. One teacher went along. And there were, actually, not everybody went. There were 42 of us who went on the, 42 and one counselor, or, teacher.
Yeah.
So anyway, it was the day we were in New York City, and we were to go out to the Statue of Liberty. And everybody's getting around and fidgeting, kind of, oh yeah, we'll make it there. We all had to take this one bus. So everybody's accounting for everybody, but we can't find him. So the teacher who was with us, his wife, went with the group of us because we had to be there to meet the ferry over to the Statue of Liberty. The teacher stays back trying to find this young man. So finally, he shows up just in time to catch the ferry with us, with no young man. And he's beside him. I mean, you could just, now being a teacher, it's like, oh my gosh, that must have been more than traumatic for him. So we get out to the Statue of Liberty and we step off the ferry, and here's this guy, and he's going, what took you all so long? And everybody just explodes laughing, going, how did you get here? He said, I took the subway to the ferry area. He said, I wasn't going to take a bus. He said, that's too many stops. And so it was just the fact that he had figured it all out, he was there ahead of us, and that he's kind of looking at us like, what's wrong with you people? And I remember he was never punished for what he did. It was just like, thank God you're alive, you didn't get lost, nothing happened to you.
Mm-hmm.
So, but other than that, I don't remember any real instances of anybody bullying or making fun of. It was more sad than that. It was like they didn't exist. The special ed class didn't exist. I mean, yeah, they...
Yeah. How were they... What was the terminology used? Was it to describe them, these students?
They were either called the special ed kids, or they were called, my least favorite word in the world, the retards. Which could account very much for the reason I hate that word so strongly.
So what is your learning style?
My learning style? step in and enjoy the experience.
So
Yeah.